Alright, so welcome back to my channel, you guys. I did want to share with you my concealer collection because when it comes to my makeup routine, I feel like concealer is my absolute favorite. So I do have a lot of products. I do want to point out that some of them in my collection I absolutely love, and then some of them not so much. But I kind of want to do this video to make it easier for you guys when you do go shopping to know what products to pick out and which ones to avoid. So with that being said, you guys want to go ahead and see what I have in my collection. Make sure you like and subscribe, and let's go ahead and jump right into the video. Okay, so I do have all of them in front of me, and I will start off with Drugstore just because you can go ahead and grab them right away because they're so affordable. The first one I do want to point out is the LA Girl Pro Concealer. They're HD concealer, and everybody knows about this concealer, okay? I used to have about like 10 shades in between for contour, for concealing, for highlighting. Like no matter what it was, I had a shade. But when it comes to this concealer, I will say it's not my absolute favorite because once I do blend it out, it is creamy, but it doesn't give me that flawless look that I'm looking for. I do love it for contouring my face more than anything, but for actual concealer, it's not my favorite. But it's so affordable and so cheap for those who do want to try out a concealer. Moving on to the next one, I do have the Makeup Revolution Conceal and Define Full Coverage Conceal and Contour. When this came out, everybody went crazy because it kind of reminds us of the Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. The doe foot applicator is just as big and just, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of it. So with that being said, I went to the store, I went to Ulta, and I grabbed it right away. But I will say after a while of using it, it wasn't my favorite. It is a creamy concealer on the skin, but I did notice on my skin it oxidized really badly because I would put it on and then hours later I would look very orange in the face, and I couldn't figure out what it was till I realized it was a concealer itself. So I don't know, they've came out with different versions of the concealers. I may need to try another one in their collection, but this one is just not my favorite. Alright, so moving on to Maybelline. I do have their Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Eraser Dark Circles. I have it in the shade Caramel, and funny enough with this, you guys remember when it first came out, just in general, they didn't have a lot of shades for women of color, so they kind of did a rebrand, I believe about 2 to 3 years ago, and they came out with new shades. So I went to the store and I grabbed the shade Caramel. I'm being honest, it is a little bit too light for my skin. I don't know why I picked this shade up, and I do believe after using this for such a long time, I do need to go shade up. But besides that, I love the formula. I love how creamy it is on the skin. It blends really well and looks absolutely flawless. So I do recommend this, but at the same time, this one is way too light for me. Now moving on to the Maybelline Fit Me Concealer. Out of any concealer I do talk about, this is one of my absolute favorites. I feel like it doesn't matter if you have oily skin, dry skin, in between skin, or whatever else is out there. It just works for everybody. And looking at the bottom, I do have the shade Tan, and I love the shade because it is not too dark or too light for my skin tone. It's a neutral golden concealer, and it looks absolutely beautiful on the skin. I love this concealer. It's one of my favorites. Now moving on to this next concealer, I actually got it a couple months ago, and it's one of my favorites when it comes to Drugstore, and it's the e.l.f. 16 Hour Camo Concealer, and I got it in the matte version. They do have a matte and a dewy version, I believe, but I love this because there's so many shades to pick from when it comes to women of color, and I do have one of their darker shades, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's so dark and rich, and I love it because on my skin it gives me like a nice contour. But when it comes to the actual concealer itself, I will say I love it because of the applicator. For some reason, I just love big applicators. It makes it very easy to apply concealer on your face. But when it comes to the actual formula itself, it's so creamy, and once it dries down, it is not moving throughout the day. So if you do have oily skin, I highly recommend this. And also I forgot to mention that the name is Deep Cinnamon, so I will put all the names down below if I do forget. But funny enough, I've heard about this for like a year now, and I just picked it up, so I'm kind of late, but at the same time, y'all, this concealer is bomb. Okay, so we only have 3 more concealers left when it comes to Drugstore, and one of them is L'Oreal Paris Infallible Full Wear Concealer, and I have it in the shade Honey. Another reason why I do love it is because of the applicator itself. It just has that huge applicator that a lot of people love, but at the same time, this formula is kind of funny because it is full coverage, but it doesn't feel cakey on the skin. Because when I read the word full coverage, I just thought, you know, I don't know, for some reason I thought it would be very cakey on my skin, but once I blend it out, it looks absolutely flawless. And I also really like the shade because it's a neutral golden undertone. For some reason, a lot of drugstore concealers pull very golden or very deep, but they don't have a lot in between. So I appreciate the fact that Honey is like that neutral golden tone that I really like. Now moving on to the next concealer, I do have the Wet n Wild PhotoFocus concealer, and I have it in the shade dark, I do believe. I don't have the name on here, but I do think it's dark, or actually dark cocoa. So with this, it's just a regular concealer. It's nothing crazy at all, but at the same time, I love this on like no makeup days because it blends right into the skin. Now it's not a full coverage concealer, but at the same time, once you put it on, it makes the area really smooth and flawless. So that's the reason why I like it, because when it comes to work, I don't like putting on a full face. So I take this and apply it underneath my eyes, around my mouth, blend it out, and I just look like I have no makeup on. So that's how I use it. But if you don't like, you know, how do I say this, skin-like concealers, this may not be your favorite. Now last but not least, I do have the NYX Can't Stop Won't Stop concealer that Alyssa Ashley worked on with NYX, and I absolutely love this concealer because the formula is so different, and I have it in the shade Mahogany as well. This concealer kind of reminds me of a gel-like concealer. Once you put it on, it blends out really well, but at the same time, the formula is just so different. It's kind of hard to describe. So let me show you guys what I mean, because once you put it on, it is a little bit thick. I'm not gonna lie, it is kind of thick on the skin. But let me grab a brush. All right, so with this concealer, I will say the reason why the gel-like consistency is very nice, because once you try to blend it out into the skin, y'all can tell it is very full coverage, but at the same time, it is not very liquidy. It's not moving. It just stays put wherever you put it on. And if you do have oily skin, I love formulas like this because I just know once I put it on my skin, it is not moving throughout the day. So you just blend it out and it looks absolutely smooth and flawless on the skin. So y'all can see what I mean. Once I blend it out in this area, everything just looks really, really nice. So with this formula, I will say some people out there may or may not like it. It just depends because it is very thick and full on the face. But at the same time, if you love a full coverage concealer, I'm telling you right now, this concealer is for you. So now moving on to high-end concealers, I do have a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start right now, but I think I'll start off with the NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer in the shade Amande. They do have their creamy concealer, which I kind of like, but at the same time, it just creases really bad for me, so I haven't repurchased that over the years. But I do have their Soft Matte Concealer. When I first tried this, I didn't like it just because something about it, like it just creased really bad underneath the eyes. But once I just apply the formula, let it sit for a second and then blend it out, it literally makes your skin look so flawless. So I do recommend this if you do have oily skin or dry skin. Honestly, it doesn't matter. It's just a really nice concealer. So moving on to the next one, I do have the Fenty Beauty concealer in the shade 410, their Pro Filter concealer. This concealer, you guys, it has that gel-like consistency I was talking about earlier. Once you apply it on the skin, it just sits right there and it blends out so nice on the face. But for some reason, I love this more on my eyes more than anything. It's a really great base for eyeshadow. It makes everything look very vibrant. And one thing I do want to point out is if you do have the same skin tone as me, this shade is perfect for the eyes because it's not too light, it's not too dark, it just blends right in. And I know a lot of people out there love it for the face, but for me, you guys, I love it more for the eyes. Now moving on to Tarte Shape Tape Concealer, why did I say it like that? Concealer. I have it in the shade Deep, and when this first came out, you guys, I will say I really love this concealer, and I still do because it is a full coverage concealer, and I love the applicator, of course. And even though it's a full coverage concealer, it doesn't look cakey on the face, which is why I really like it. But one thing I do want to say when it comes to this concealer is I love the formula. I have nothing against it, but the shade itself is my issue because the shade Deep, once I apply it on my face, you cannot tell a difference because it matches my skin perfectly, and the shade below it is way too light and the shade above it is way too dark. So I think they need one more shade and we'll be good to go. But besides that, I do love the formula. Now moving on to the next concealer I do have for you guys, I have the Smashbox Studio Skin 24-Hour Waterproof Concealer in the shade Dark. And with this, on the shade Dark, To me, when I hear that name, it's supposed to be a little bit darker, but with this, it's actually pretty light on the skin, but it still works for my skin tone. So now for the actual formula itself, I will say it's not my absolute favorite. Like, I don't typically gravitate towards it because when I read the word waterproof, for some reason, I thought it would be a full coverage concealer, but to me, it's very watery on the skin, and I do have to go in a couple times to build it up to the coverage that I'm looking for. So it's not a terrible concealer, I just don't prefer the coverage it gives off, and I don't like the fact that it's very watery on the skin. So now moving on to the next one, I have the Amazing Cosmetics concealer in the shade Dark Caramel, and with this, I will say a little bit does go a long way. You don't need too much with this, but something about the shade, I don't know what it is. The undertone is just off for me because when I apply it on my skin, you guys, because this is the shade Dark Caramel, I don't know how to describe it, but on camera, it probably won't pick up, but in person, it looks very peachy and just orangey on the skin. And I do remember in Ulta, they do have different shades to pick from, so I probably just have to try a different one out there. But I love this for like a no makeup look because all you need is a dab, you guys. Blend it underneath your eyes, around your mouth, or wherever else you have to conceal, and you're good to go. But the color itself is just something I cannot get with, but the formula itself is nice. Now, the next two I do have, one of them is a MAC Pro Longwear Concealer. This is such an OG product, and I have it in the shade NW40. I don't have much to say about this because it is just awesome if you have oily skin. Once you put it on your skin and blend it out, it is not moving at all. So I highly recommend this one. Now this one, you guys, Naked Skin Concealer from Urban Decay. You guys do know how I feel about it. It is not a terrible concealer. It is very light on the skin. It doesn't feel cakey or heavy at all. But at the same time, for the price you're paying, I just don't think it's worth it because it doesn't perform, you know, to me at least, better than a drugstore concealer. And I know when it first came out, a lot of people went crazy about it because it is a great concealer. It's very lightweight on the skin and so on. But for the price you're paying, I feel like it just needs to do a little bit more. All right, so moving on to the last two concealers I do have in my collection. You guys have heard this a million times on my channel, but it's a Cover FX Power Play Concealer in the shade N Deep 2, and this is a neutral golden concealer, but I can just say so much about this. It blends really well, you guys. It looks absolutely flawless. It doesn't crease on my skin. It never looks cakey or bad. Like, once I put it on, I just know for sure I don't have to worry about my concealer throughout the day, and it's just my absolute favorite in the whole entire world. I love it. So the last concealer I do have for you guys is the Hourglass Vanish Airbrush Concealer in the shade Maple. And this came out this year, and I had to pick it up because I do believe it's Hourglass first concealer or something like that. But the reviews were really great on Sephora, so I had to grab it for you guys. And with this, it's one of my favorites because it is a full, and I mean full coverage concealer, but at the same time it doesn't look cakey on the skin. And with this, a little bit does go a long way, so you don't need too much. But one thing I do want to point out is the shade is a little bit too golden for my skin tone, because you guys know I love a neutral golden concealer on my skin, but with this I feel like it's way too golden, so I can't apply too much. I just put a little bit in the inner corner and then blend it out, and I'm good to go. So for those out there who love a full coverage concealer, this concealer is for you. Okay, so those were all the concealers I do have in my collection. I hope you guys found some favorites within the video. So with that being said, let me know down below some other concealers you do recommend for me, and I will pick them up. But with that being said, I love you guys so much. Make sure you like, subscribe before you do leave, and I'll see you guys in my next one.